Hi everyone, Carl Steele here with the last video on Boethius in Book 5, Verse Consolation of Philosophy. What I have pictured here is a 15th century translation into Hebrew of the Consolation of Philosophy. It is, as you can see at the bottom, it belongs to the College of the Neophytes, which is, I believe, a 17th century institution set up in the Vatican for converts from Judaism and Islam to Catholicism to live and to study and to become missionaries to try to convert more Jews and more Muslims to Catholicism. So it's interesting to me, first, that this work was translated into Hebrew, and we have a couple different witnesses to that in the Middle Ages, and it's probably translated into Hebrew in part because Boethius, although he's a Christian, didn't include any explicitly Christian information in this work. And there were many Hebrew philosophers who were interested in the kind of Neoplatonism that Boethius himself was interested in. So there's really nothing in here, so far as I know, that a Jewish Neoplatonist would find offensive. But it's interesting then that it ends up in an institution, the Vatican, that's designed to help encourage Jews and Muslims to become Catholics. That is, for a Roman Catholic reader, perhaps the work feels at least implicitly Christian, but maybe for those of you who aren't Christian or Jews or Muslims or believers or non-believers, the work may just feel simply like a work of philosophy, like it probably did to the Jewish translator of this work. So you can get the PowerPoint, you can click through and look at the whole manuscript. And if you're able to read this particular kind of Hebrew, maybe it'll be interesting to look at that and study it. I know it's very, very understudied in medieval studies, so you may be able to do original research by doing that. Today, though, we're going to be talking about free will and necessity, which is the topic of Book 5. We're going to be looking specifically at free will and epistemology. Epistemology is the study of how it is that we know things. And so the way that humans know things versus the way that God knows things is how Boethius preserves human free will. So basically, as the problem is he poses the problem, if God is omniscient and omnipotent, then how do humans have free will? That is, if God knows in advance everything that's happening, and if he can make anything happening, and if nothing escapes from the chain of causation that God has established in advance, how is it that we're able to do anything through our own free will? There's a variety of various answers that Boethius gives, including splitting absolute necessity from conditional necessity. So that's the necessity of the sun rising and setting is absolute necessity. The decision about whether we're going to walk or not, or put on shoes or not, that's conditional necessity. And humans are able to practice conditional necessity because we have reason. So one of the things he does is he splits those two off and preserves a space for some kind of freedom to happen. But still, how does that really work? Because God still knows in advance everything that's going to happen. This is the point where Boethius starts to divide different ways of knowing and makes a significant argument on that basis. I have a bit of that passage presented here from another medieval manuscript. This is Latin, and here's a key passage for what I'm discussing today, surrounded by commentary. Again, this is also from the Vatican, so I was just looking at some manuscripts that they have there. So Boethius argues, everything that is known is comprehended not according to its own nature, but according to the ability to know of those who do the knowing. That is, we know a thing on the basis of how we're able to know it, not on the basis of what the thing is. So a slug is going to experience a sphere in one way, and perhaps human beings are going to experience it in another way, and God, being all-knowing and omnipotent, is going to experience it in yet another way. So we have, on the one hand, those creatures that have only sense perception, things like oysters, things like mussels, things that live just clinging to rocks, those kinds of animals that have sensation, but they have nothing more. So they experience life in an extremely limited way because they really can't think. All they can do is react, and they can react very minimally. And then there are those things that are able to have images. They're able to picture things. that are distinct from mere corporeal sensation. So a dog or a cat can dream, or a fish even can dream. They can picture images. And in the way that this philosophy works, they can't picture those images independent of any kind of corporeal sensation. They can't come up with new images on their own, and they can't abstract from one image to a whole universal category of objects on the basis of their thought. They have certain limitations, but they're still able to do more than, say, an oyster is in the kind of thinking they do. Then we have humans who are able to reason. And so not only are we able to experience things through our senses, not only are we able to imagine things, that is, create images in our head on the basis of the things we've experienced in a bodily sense, we're also able to reason. We can create abstract ideas, but we have to do it through a chain of causation. It happens in time. This, therefore this, this, therefore this, this, therefore this. And so there's a kind of progressive quality to the way we think that doesn't all take place simultaneously. But finally, there's something above reason, and that is the intellect, and that is what God possesses. It is undivided, it is instantaneous, it's entirely incorporeal, has no connection to the body at all. This is the way God thinks. God thinks everything all simultaneously. There's no process of reasoning necessary. There's no division in the way he thinks. There's no this, therefore this, therefore this, this, therefore this. He just thinks it and he knows it, and it all happens all at once. So humans exist in time. And so we experience our decisions in time as one thing happening after another. God, being a creature of intellect, being omnipotent, being omniscient, does not exist in time. He created time, but God exists outside of time. And so there is no past, present, or future for God. Everything is all there, completely unified, all at once. And so he sees everything that happens, everything that happened, and everything that will happen all simultaneously. That this distinction between past, present, and future doesn't exist for God. And so what we have then is that human free will exists in a sense because we don't have the power of intellect that God has. We are experiencing ourselves in time. God experiences us outside of time. And therefore, what feels to us like our free will looks to God like it's all happening all simultaneously. And so we can talk in class about how convincing this is. But basically, by creating a radical epistemological break between reason and intellect, Boethius preserves human free will. So I also want to talk about two more things, kind of key metaphors for the way that human reason works in Boethius, because I keep coming around to these metaphors. It's incredibly important. The first one is the metaphor of slavery that, like Philo, Boethius comes around to very, very often. And so he writes, for example, human souls reach an extremity of enslavement when they give themselves up to wickedness and lose possession of their proper reason. Destructive passions torment them, and by yielding and giving in to them, they only aid the slavery they have brought upon themselves and become in a manner prisoners of their own freedom. So people who make bad choices, people who allow themselves to be led by their passions, who submit to things that are outside themselves, that are merely bodily, they become like prisoners, they become like slaves, and therefore they are wicked. So this association of wickedness with terrestrial things, wickedness with the passions, slavery with wickedness, the passions, and terrestrial things, that all these things mix together in a way that, of course, indicates the things that you as a reasoning human subject don't want to be, but it also has the effect of identifying certain groups of people as inherently wicked, terrestrial, and driven by their passions. There's a way in which it kind of naturalizes the condition of slavery as a kind of punishment. Is the sort of thing that those people really should be experiencing. And so it becomes a kind of philosophical justification for slavery. I'm not sure Boethius is fully aware of what's happening here, but because slavery is such an important metaphor to him, as it is to Philo, this is, I think, one of the effects it has. It also has the effect of animalizing certain people. So Boethius writes here in this poem from Book 5, alone the race of men can lift its head on high, can stand with body upright and disdain the ground. This picture warns, except witless earthbound men, you who raise your eyes to heaven with thrusting face, raise up as well your thoughts, lest weighted down to earth, your kind sink lower as your body rises high. So this is an idea that the natural posture of human beings is to look towards the heavens, and that the natural posture of animals is quadrupedal and to look towards the ground. And you can think, of course, of counterexamples to that. Monkeys who walk around on their hind legs, birds that walk around on two legs and fly. And what we have invariably when these kinds of examples are brought up in relation to this bodily metaphor is to say, yes, but only humans choose to do that, whereas those animals don't. And so what begins as a kind of naturalistic reading of the human body to say the human body naturally wants to do this, it ultimately becomes an argument about choice. And so the very fact that the argument is incoherent indicates that the argument is really about who gets to classify things and who has to be in the position of being classified. But it also indicates too that there's this understanding that animals are somehow more bodily than humans. They're more subject to corporeal things. They're limited to this earth, and only humans are able to escape this earth. And so there is a kind of inherent argument that humans are fundamentally extracorporeal, and that animals are just necessarily bodily creatures, which therefore opens them up to being treated like any material resource, to be put to work, to be killed, to be eaten, to have their skin removed and be written on, and that any human who is animalized, as a great many humans were, are going to be subject to those same kinds of things that our animals are naturally subject to in this kind of philosophical thinking. That is, the category of the animal is something that is incredibly dangerous, I think, to human beings. And Boethius's arguments about freedom and about bodies and about extracorporeality or transcendence even has this effect, I think, in terms of the way it animalizes certain human beings and understands enslaved people as somehow inherently animal. So we can talk about that as well in class tomorrow. Thanks for listening.